In the heart of Shrewsbury, a town steeped in medieval history, stands a structure of a different age, a place built not for commerce or worship, but to be seen and to be feared. This is Shrewsbury Prison, known locally for centuries as the Dana. Its story is not just one of crime and punishment, but a reflection of society's ever-changing, often brutal, relationship with justice. From its Georgian origins, it cast a long shadow over this community, a constant, silent reminder of the consequences of stepping outside the law. For over 200 years, its walls contain the desperate, the defiant, and the damned. To understand why this prison was built, we must look back to the late 18th century. British justice was often a public spectacle. Punishments were carried out in the open, in market squares and on city gates, designed to deter the masses through raw, visible terror. But a new philosophy was emerging, championed by reformers like John Howard. They argued that punishment should not be a chaotic public display, but a controlled institutional process. The goal was no longer just to punish the body, but to discipline the mind and reform the soul. Shrewsbury Prison, commissioned in 1787 and opened in 1793, was a direct product of this radical new thinking. It was designed by Thomas Telford, one of the great engineers of the age, and was intended to be a machine for correction. The architecture itself was a tool of control. This prison was built to intimidate. The imposing gatehouse, more akin to a medieval fortress, was the first statement of the state's absolute power. Inside, the layout was meticulously planned for surveillance. Wings radiated from a central point, allowing a small number of guards to observe a large number of inmates without being seen themselves. This principle, known as the panopticon, created a constant sense of being watched, a psychological pressure intended to break an inmate's will. Its massive stone walls and silent cell blocks were meant to crush resistance before a sentence even truly began. The very air was thick with authority. For a new prisoner, the experience was one of systematic depersonalization. Upon arrival, they were stripped of their name, their clothes, and their identity, replaced with a number and a coarse uniform. The day was rigidly structured, governed by the clang of bells that dictated every moment from waking to sleeping. The guiding principle was the separate system. Inmates were held in strict conditions, often confined alone for long periods, to prevent what was called moral contamination. Communication was forbidden. In the chapel they sat in partitioned stalls, able to see the preacher but not each other. Even outside in the exercise yards they wore masks and were forced to walk in silent single file. A warder from the era might have described the ideal state as one where each man hears nothing but the echo of his own footsteps and the word of God. The regime was summarized by the chilling phrase, hard labor, hard fare, and a hard bed. Labor was not intended to be productive, but punitive. It was designed to be monotonous, exhausting, and utterly pointless. Hard labor was routine. The most notorious devices were the crank and the treadwheel. The crank was an iron handle in a box of sand, which a prisoner had to turn thousands of times a day, tightened by the warder to be almost impossible. It was nicknamed turning the screw for good reason. The treadwheel was a giant human-powered hamster wheel, where lines of men would trudge for hours, climbing steps that went nowhere, simply to pump water or grind corn. Other tasks included stone-breaking or picking oakum, unraveling old tarred ropes, a painful task that left fingers raw and bleeding. The aim was to make the experience of prison so physically and mentally draining that no one would ever wish to return. For the most serious crimes, Shrewsbury Prison held the ultimate sanction. In its early years, executions were public events held outside its walls. But by the mid-19th century, they were moved inside, hidden from public view. This did not lessen their impact. Executions were carried out inside the prison, hidden from the public but known throughout the town. On the morning of a hanging, a black flag would be raised over the gatehouse, a somber signal to the community. The condemned would be led from their cell to the execution room, a short final walk. The procedure was swift, clinical, and terrifying. Though unseen, the town held its breath, knowing that behind the high walls, a life was being deliberately and lawfully extinguished. The prison held the power of life and death. As the Victorian era progressed into the 20th century, the ideals of the separate system began to crumble under a harsh reality. Britain's population boomed, and with it, the number of people sent to prison. Overcrowding became a serious problem. The prison, designed for separation, was forced into association. Cells, designed for one person, were often forced to hold two or more, a practice known as doubling up. This completely undermined the original philosophy and created new dangers. The cramped, unsanitary conditions became a breeding ground for disease, like tuberculosis and typhoid. While sanitation slowly improved over the decades, the fundamental problem remained. The building was struggling to cope with the sheer number of bodies packed within it. The system was breaking. By the late 20th century, the prison was an anachronism. The Victorian structure, once a model of modern penology, was now hopelessly outdated. Its sanitation was primitive, its heating inadequate, and its layout unsuitable for modern approaches to rehabilitation and education. Reports highlighted the grim conditions, with prisoners spending up to 23 hours a day locked in their small cells due to staff shortages and the building's inherent limitations. The practice of slopping out, using a bucket as a toilet, continued at Shrewsbury long after it had been abolished elsewhere. The prison was considered outdated and increasingly unsafe for both inmates and staff. Its time was running out. The end finally came in January 2013, when the Ministry of Justice announced that Shrewsbury Prison was one of several older institutions slated for closure. The decision was economic and practical. The building was too expensive to maintain and ill-suited for the 21st century. On the 28th of February 2013, the last prisoners were transferred out, and the heavy gates were locked one final time. After 220 years of continuous operation, the Dana fell silent. The bells stopped ringing, the footsteps faded, and the constant, oppressive hum of institutional life ceased. Today, the prison stands not as a place of punishment, but as a site of memory and education. It hosts tours, events, and serves as a filming location, its preserved decay offering a chillingly authentic backdrop. The empty cells and silent landings now speak to a new audience, not of their own transgressions, but of the lives lived and lost within these walls. Shrewsbury Prison is a vast, stone archive of our changing ideas about crime, control, and humanity. It stands as a powerful physical reminder of how fear was once built directly into the architecture of justice, and it asks us to consider what we, in our own time, are building in its place.